It's Monday, and the next City Skylines 2 developer diary and feature highlight video have dropped, this time covering maps and themes. And though this is a shorter diary, it provides us some big news about the size and scale of maps, how they unlock, and how building themes work. The TLDR version, tiles in City Skylines 2 are approximately 1/3 the size of tiles in City Skylines, and nearly the entire map is unlockable. The playable area is 159 kilometers squared, 5 times bigger than the playable area in City Skylines, but this comes with a pretty big asterisk that we'll talk about a little bit later on in the video. Map tiles do not have to be connected to one another, allowing the creation of isolated communities, and you now have a ton of freedom to switch between themes. But there's a ton more to each of these topics, so in today's video, we'll deep dive into the developer diary, then we'll go over the feature highlight video and see what secrets we can decode, and I'll let you know my reactions along the way. So let's begin by taking a look at the developer diary, where it starts out by walking us through how to start out a new city. To begin, you're going to be provided with information about the map's default theme, climate, latitude, which will impact when seasons occur, the map's buildable area, resources, and outside connections available at the start. After picking a map, you'll be presented with a number of familiar options. However, you are now able to change the default theme when you begin a city. This was not possible in City Skylines without a mod, even though the option appeared to be available. I'm really happy to see this fixed. And upon starting a new city, 9 tiles will be unlocked from the onset, which will provide a building area similar to what you'd have when you start a new city in City Skylines. Next, the diary discusses unlocking map tiles. The ability to purchase additional map tiles is unlocked when reaching milestones, just like in City Skylines. And like in City Skylines, when you purchase a tile, you can view key information about the tiles, such as the buildable area, the resources within the tile, and the cost of the tile, which is directly impacted by the resources within the tile. What's new is that now you have the ability to unlock tiles that are non-contiguous, or that are not touching one another. Further, you can now unlock multiple tiles at once and view their information in aggregate, which should make creating small towns much easier. And I like these changes. However, I do wonder about the cost of a tile. In City Skylines, I think that tiles were far too cheap, making unlocking them less about the cost of the tile and more about reaching the milestone. I'd love for the game to provide a bit more challenge in this regard. Next, I want to cover a topic that's really covered quickly in 2 brief paragraphs at the start of the diary: map tile size. And this is an interesting topic that I haven't wanted to touch with a 10-foot stick without having more info. But now that we have more info, here goes nothing. The diary states that each map tile in City Skylines 2 is approximately 1/3 the size of a map tile in City Skylines, and you're able to purchase almost every tile on the map, 441 in total, for a playable area of 159 kilometers squared, approximately 5 times bigger than the playable area in City Skylines. And I think that these numbers can be a little bit misleading, so let's dive in a little bit deeper, do some math, and get the whole scoop. In City Skylines, you could unlock 9 tiles without mods on the PC and console for a total buildable area of approximately 33 kilometers squared. The console remaster allows you to unlock up to 25 tiles for a total buildable area of approximately 92 kilometers squared. However, if you play on a PC, you're probably accustomed to playing with the 81 Tiles 2 mod, which allows you to unlock the entire map for a total of 299 kilometers squared. So the total unlockable area would be approximately half of the total modded unlockable area in City Skylines. However, we need to dive into this a bit more to fully understand what we're looking at. First of all, 441 tiles is not the entire map. That would be 21 tiles by 21 tiles. And as seen in this picture of New Dollarton, the map is actually 23 tiles by 23 tiles. Working backwards, if the entire buildable area of City Skylines 2 is 159 kilometers squared, the square root of that would be 12.6 kilometers squared, and that would be the width of 21 tiles. So each tile would be 0.6 kilometers squared. And we know that this number is right because it's approximately 1/3 the size of a tile in City Skylines. And if we multiply that 0.6 kilometers squared by 23, we find that the total map area is 190 kilometers squared. Still about 100 kilometers squared smaller than the full City Skylines map area. To reach the exact same map area, City Skylines 2 would have had to add approximately 6 additional tiles in either direction. So yes, in terms of raw size, the maps are smaller, as has been speculated for months now. And while this might sound disappointing, I want you to take a step back and look at this photo of New Dollarton. In my opinion, the city looks tiny relative to the map. And this has me thinking that scaling might be different in City Skylines 2 than in City Skylines. If you're unfamiliar with scaling is the proportionality of an asset in the game to its size in real life. There are many conversations about asset scaling in the City Skylines Steam forums and a robust debate about what the preferred scale should be. The common scales that I found for City Skylines were either 1 to 1.5 or 1 to 2, or more simply, half or 75% of an asset's real-life size when recreated in the game. The scaling in City Skylines 2 could be different than that, which would have an impact on how big or small things feel, so keep an eye out for that. All of that said, I think it's also important to acknowledge that City Skylines 2 does not have hard-coded limits. Your hardware is a limiting factor, so even in a smaller area, you're going to be able to build much larger cities without the fear of them breaking down before you can fill up the map. Further, we can also assume that building at the edge of the map will actually work properly, since you're now actively encouraged to do so. So basically, I think we need to have nuanced takes on this topic. Yes, the overall map size is smaller, but we know very little about the asset scaling. Without hard-coded limits, we might actually be able to fill more of the map in, and we're going to be able to build all the way to the edge of the map. So in my opinion, this is all about trade-offs, and I'm good with the trade-offs that they've made. Let's move on to talking about the starter maps. We now have more information about the 10 maps that come with the game. All the maps were inspired by real-world locations, with some hints given about some of those locations. As we go through these maps, drop a comment below if you recognize any of these places, and I'll compile them into a pinned comment. And if you could, please leave coordinates so we can actually take a look at a map. Here are the 10 maps that come with City Skylines 2. Archipelago Haven, which has many small islands, atolls, lagoons, peninsulas, and keys. Barrier Island, which has long island chains parallel to a mainland. Great Highlands, which draws inspiration from the Highlands region in Scotland and has flat-top mountain ranges and long, narrow, deep lakes. Lakeland, which was inspired by the Finnish Lakeland region. Mountain Village, which draws inspiration from small cities near the Alps. River Delta, which contains a large curving river and islands near the delta itself. Sweeping Plains, which draws inspiration from the Canterbury Plains region in New Zealand. Twin Mountain, which draws inspiration from Iceland and has snow-capped mountains. Waterway Pass, which has a flat plain split in half by a river with mountain ranges on either side of that river. And Windy Fjords, which is inspired by the fjord coast likely in Norway. A Tampere, Finland map is available as a pre-order bonus, and a San Francisco map is available with one of the first expansion passes. After marveling at the maps for a while, I couldn't help but notice two things. First, most of the maps appear to be from the Northern Hemisphere, specifically Europe. And second, none of the maps are tropical. In fact, I don't see palm trees anywhere, and I'm wondering if these trees will be available at release or if they'll be added as the first major patch to the game. It's worth noting that tunnels and European-themed buildings and maps were added with the 1.10 patch for City Skylines, 2 months after the game was released and 4 months before the first DLC, After Dark. So there is a chance that these are just things that are going to be added a little bit down the line. Next, the diary dives into a bit more detail about outside connections. All maps come with at least one outside road connection, one airway connection, and one power line connection. Most maps have a train and seaway connection as well. Outside connections can now be added for roads, trains, and ships once an outer edge of a map is unlocked. So maps that don't have a train or seaway connection by default may be able to have them added after the fact. I'm really glad to see the ability to add outside connections added to the game. That's one more mod that I don't have to add to my collection. That said, I'm hoping that some of the maps have smaller roadways as outside connections, and I really hope that it's easy to remove outside connections. Nothing has been mentioned about that yet. And finally, we have a short discussion of themes. As mentioned earlier, you can pick a base theme when you start a map. This base theme will define the default buildings that will spawn, the street markings, traffic lights, roadside props, and even some models for city service buildings, though we have no information about which buildings are impacted. You cannot change the base theme after starting a city, for now, so choose carefully. However, you can change the building theme anytime that you zone, so creating a city with a mix of themes is now possible. Interestingly, changing a building theme will also change the visual appearance of some public transit stops, and you're going to be able to freely change them in-game as well. And honestly, I really can't wait for additional building themes to be released as expansion or for themes to come out on the workshop. I think this is really shaping up to be one of the most important additions to the game, so long as themes are released by Colossal Order or asset creators are given full abilities to create their own themes. Time will tell on both accounts. Before we move on to my final thoughts, let's take a look at the feature highlights video. I'm going to start here because this is absolutely beautiful. The natural environment looks absolutely marvelous in City Skylines 2, and these mountains look so much better than anything you'd see in a vanilla City Skylines game. Absolutely outstanding. Now I want to stop here for just a moment because I want to point out two things. First of all, we've got some strange lighting and reflection effects happening here. This person is reflecting onto the tram, as is this light right here, and the effect is pretty bad. We also have these posts right here. They, I think, are in the wrong spot. They should probably be right here. Same thing with this. probably should be shifted over. So I want to point these out because I think that a lot of this trailer may be older footage. Can't really be certain, but I think it really highlights how beta this really is. We're also seeing a blurry texture right here for the speed limit. So things to keep in mind that I'm guessing a number of things that we're seeing today could change over time. And then let's stop and take a look at this image and the next one for just a moment. And I want to point out the building right here. This building is actually lower than the road, and it looks like the game is handling this difference in elevation pretty well. This road is higher than this building, and in City Skylines, there'd be some pretty bad tearing right here, or some blobby concrete trying to hide it. What we have in City Skylines 2 is what appears to be a paver decal that's kind of cutting the difference here, and it looks all right. And then if we go along a little ways, we get to see the same building right here, and it looks pretty natural. So I think that it's handling challenging terrains pretty well. And now I want to focus here for just a moment. And there's a couple of interesting things. First of all, New Dollarton actually has some small towns. So I never noticed this, but there's a small, looks like Coleridge Glen right over here. So that's pretty neat. And we zoom out and we get to see the full scale of the map, and it is very large. But again, very beta looking. The outside of this area looks pretty rough. And then as we move around a bit, the water's doing some things. So I'm actually kind of surprised they're showing us this image because of how rough it looks around the edges. But I do think that it kind of drives home a point that we're looking at a lot of stuff that's likely going to change, that may have already changed. My guess is they filmed a whole bunch of B-roll back in April or May, and we're seeing the fruits of that right now. All of this is to say that we could be seeing some significant changes between now and release day. Now here we're getting our first overview of Biffa's new Telen, which is pretty cool, but I don't want to focus on that so much. We do see Biffa likes his roundabouts, but what I want to focus on is that we've got all of these disconnected areas that have been purchased on the map. So we have the main areas that it looks like Biffa has purchased to link these areas together, and now they're purchasing an area here. This has been purchased as well. So is this and this one right here. Now, a big question that we haven't had answered yet is, if you were to purchase this area and there are no transportation connections here, what can you actually do here? Because that is going to be a concern of mine. Do we have to build along transportation corridors, or are we able to just simply add a transportation connection through these areas that we haven't purchased if we buy an area that's disconnected? Time will tell there. The other interesting thing about this map is we're seeing these snow-capped mountains, and that is a really neat feature. I'm wondering how much this relates to the temperature, if these are always snow-capped. Where is this temperature? Is this the ground level temperature? Not really sure, but in an area this big with this much elevation change, you would expect that the temperature is different in different places. Probably not going to get into that level of detail, but it is something that's interesting when you have a map with this much elevation change. Living in Los Angeles for a while, I know all about microclimates, and a place like this would likely have some microclimates. And now we're getting our first look at progression and milestones. And the very first thing I notice is that there are a lot of them in comparison to City Skylines. In fact, there are 20 different progression milestones here, and there were 13 in City Skylines. Now, the way that you progress through these is by gaining experience points, which is another change from City Skylines, where you only leveled up by reaching certain population milestones. So not 100% clear on what the experience points are, but we know that that's how you move between the milestones. So for Tiny Village, our first milestone, it looks like we get a boatload of cash. This, not 100% sure what this is. And then we also get 3 tiles, I believe is what this is going to be. We get a loan limit, and that's a pretty significant loan, or at least it would be in City Skylines. I'm guessing it's not so great here. And then we can buy map tiles, change our city budget, look at our city statistics. We get some of our medium density row housing, which is great to see, and roads. Next one is Small Village, and it looks like we need quite a few more experience points, about 4 times more, and now we get a loan. Now I'm curious if this is an additional 150,000 on top of the 100,000 we had for our previous milestone. That's what I'm guessing. It looks like we get to change our taxation policies here. More medium density housing instead of the row homes. Now it's the apartment style homes. And then we get our development tree. So I'm curious if these are actually development skill points. I'm guessing that's what these are. So interesting to see that. And we also have elementary school and high school unlocking at Small Village. Now I'm curious if, because there are outside connections, if we have a need for elementary school and high school before Small Village, but all the students just go to neighboring outside connections. That would make a lot of sense to me with the way that this game is designed, but we'll have to wait and find out. At Large Village, we're getting to unlock even more tiles, even bigger loans, but the really interesting thing here is we get to address our city service budgets, and it looks like some of these industrial areas are finally unlocking. So that whole progression is unlocking at Large Village. And it's great to see that that is so early as that is, because many cities will develop around industries. In fact, truthfully, I'd love to see this even earlier, but this seems to be a fair place for it. Then again, we'll have to see how it feels while we're actually playing the game. Now, this one's kind of interesting to me. So we're at Grand Village and we get more loans. We get to make districts, so that they form neighborhoods. That makes sense. Our production panel unlocks now, so we don't get that with our industries. We get our policies now and natural disasters. So no disasters to worry about until you get to Grand Village. Then we get to take a look at our transportation overview. Presumably no transportation issues until then. And then we get low rent housing. And those are actually huge buildings. So kind of interested to see that so early in your city's progression. And then looking at Tiny Town, it makes it even more interesting because we're only getting mixed use now. So we're getting mixed use at this point, but we've already got these gigantic apartment blocks, these low income blocks. I'm really going to be interested in seeing what population we can actually unlock these at. And it makes me curious if you're able to unlock these with lower populations or not. Really can't wait to learn more about this mechanic. Also very interesting that coal mining unlocks after some of those other industries. Same with vegetable farming. So even more industries to look at. We've seen 6 at this point, and it looks like we can get the internet at Tiny Town as well. So here we're seeing that you could buy this little chunk of land, and a couple of interesting things here. First of all, we could purchase this land. There's only a railway connection here. So I don't know how this would work if we don't have any roadway connection and we don't have the ability to build rails. It doesn't seem to be preventing us from buying this, so presumably we could. So does that mean we need to build a C connection? We'll have to find out. We also get to see the cost of this tile. Now this cost is higher than City Skylines, but what I mentioned earlier in the video is I wanted to see these to be, I guess, more punitive in terms of the cost of annexation, because it seemed more like a formality in City Skylines, and I think it's likely to feel the same way here. Because when we were unlocking these different milestones, we were getting at least $100,000 to reach that milestone, and then 3 permits, 5 permits. If this one tile is 10,000, then this is easily covered. We're getting 10 times more than that when we reach the milestone to level up to be able to purchase this. So I guess that won't be a thing. I might actually, if a mod opens up that would allow us to make the game a little bit more difficult, I would personally like to have that, because that challenge to me is really fun. The one thing that could change this, maybe these costs really increase with time. Hard to say. We'll have to wait and see for that one as well. Now I'm looking at this overview again of New Dollarton, and we can see that $2.20 is purchased out to an outside connection over here. But that got me thinking. This is 23 tiles across in either direction. What if you were to not purchase all the way to the outside? That would be really unfortunate. I wonder if the game is going to allow you to inadvertently hem yourself in, because I could see someone accidentally purchasing the interior 21 tiles and not being able to reach an outside connection, and that being fairly devastating. So very curious to see if there's going to be something to prevent you from doing that. Also, this just makes me think, these extra couple of tiles, there's going to be a mod to unlock that. It'll be like a day 1 or day 2 mod, because it just, to me, it seems like kind of an artificial limitation. Now, here's something interesting. We're seeing an outside connection being created, and 2 things that I see here that are really interesting to me. First of all, I assume that this is a European 2-way road. So we've got a highway, bidirectional highway, just a 2-lane road. So the type of cities I like building without overbuilt highways are totally going to be possible in City Skylines too. So that's great to see. The other thing is that in City Skylines 1, we would just have people standing on the side of the highway spawning, and there would be kind of some fog to block it. They're showing us everything. Not a big deal, but just kind of an interesting choice there. And now we're at the new game screen and we see something interesting. This was added in post. You can see that they actually added this on. And basically what we're seeing is that San Francisco and Tampere are actually maps that do not come with the game. So this is from the expansion pass. Really curious. We're going to see palm trees in San Francisco. That is what is there in real life. Perhaps that's part of that expansion pass. Hard to say. And then for this map, we know that this is now a pre-order unlock. So a lot of people have been asking, why would you pre-order? This might be a reason. This is a very interesting map. So Tampere is actually the map that we used for 5B1C Season 1. Absolutely awesome map. Reminds me a lot of Madison, truthfully, because you have this isthmus with these two large lakes, the larger lake to the north, the smaller lake to the south. Sounds very familiar, and some other smaller lakes in the area. So it's a really fun map to build on. At least it was in Cities Skylines, and I'm really excited to see what it looks like in Cities Skylines too. Might be the first map I build on. You never know. Now we're only seeing a couple of the maps actually get selected here in this menu, but what we see is that most of them are European, and then the descriptions of some of these other ones describe them as being European. So I am very interested in seeing when we're going to have maps from other regions of the world be available to us. That said, these do look like very interesting maps. They, again, it's representing a very small portion of the world. And on that note, we're taking a look at our themes now. And, again, we've got two themes, European and North American. North American, first of all, there's three countries, Canada, the US, and Mexico. But in each of those countries, there is a great diversity in terms of architecture. In Europe, boy, oh boy, there's so much diversity. You think of the difference between the UK and Greece, for instance. There's just no comparison in terms of the architecture and what you'd expect to see there. So I am very interested in knowing what kinds of theme packs we're going to get, because I assume that there's going to be some very specific theme packs. I assume that the San Francisco theme pack is going to be very specific to Northern California, which has a different architectural style than Southern California. So there's really an unlimited number of theme options that could be available. I'm going to be very interested in knowing how the game loads these themes and how much RAM it takes, because I could see this becoming a thing. This seems like it's going to be a thing. I love that it's going to be a thing, but I do wonder about RAM in relation to loading all these different assets, or if it's not going to load it until it's placed in your community. Stopping here briefly just to take a look at some more challenging terrain, and really the game is handling it absolutely beautifully. We've got some of our bushes that are really handling the terrain well. The yard is conforming to the ground. We see that the building itself has additional height in its walls. I think it's doing a really good job with terrain. And then we finish off with some views of some more landscapes, and I'll just be honest, there isn't one of these that is unattractive. So they've done an excellent job making these. I am very curious as to how inspired these are by real places versus actual real places, real height maps that have been maybe embellished here or there. So if any of these places look familiar to you, again, please drop it down in the comments, because I'm really interested in knowing if they are real places or not. Also, very interesting to see the snow. That is certainly very new to this game. Very excited to see how this actually works, if we have to place the snow ourselves or if it just shows up at certain elevations. I'm guessing we have to place it based on it being kind of randomly right here and over here, but very curious to know about that. And the very last thing I want to point out is it seems like most of the infrastructure on these base maps is considerable. So we're looking at interstate style highways here, very large highways. We got some rail networks through here. So that was one of the things that I wondered right off the bat is, are we going to have these maps that have a ton of infrastructure built, or are we going to have just 2-lane roads? It seems like we have our answer now. We have that right here, just a ton of infrastructure. Not the end of the world. It's just something I was a little concerned about. And the one thing I'll say is we are starting the game with some really high quality maps. Think back to your experience in Cities Skylines 1. Day one, the maps were fine, but it was clear that the developers were still learning how to do things themselves in the map maker. It seems like they've mastered making maps, and it's very clear when you look at these. So very excited for the maps that we get with the game, which is good because we're not going to have really good maps for a little while, I'm guessing, as people acclimate and learn how to use the tools. I could be surprised too. We've all got experience in City Skylines 1, but still, day one, there will be excellent maps to build on. And with that, let's take a look at my final thoughts. In general, I'm really happy with the direction that things are going in City Skylines 2. I like the idea of smaller map tiles. I like that we can purchase tiles that are discontiguous, and I think that City Skylines is really going to lean into themes, and I'm really excited for that. Yes, the map size is smaller, but I really don't think it's that big of a deal, considering we aren't even able to fill in a whole 81 tile map in City Skylines without hitting the node limit. And in City Skylines, it took me years to fill in an entire map. The map size means that the game is going to be more accessible to more players across more platforms, and I think that that's a good thing. I will be curious to know if mods will allow expansion into the 529 tile area and beyond. I wouldn't put it past our talented modding community, and it's going to be really exciting to see what they can do. But what do you think about the new map info and the themes? Let me know down in the comments, or if you're bashful, consider dropping an emoji for the sake of engagement, and hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. Thanks again for joining me in another one of these deep dives. Remember, we're doing this every Monday until City Skylines 2 comes out. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.